Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Breaking into the Financial Services Industry webinar. My name is Marley. I'm the marketing manager for Prepped, and with me today I have Joel Robinson and Jesse Coote. So thank you guys for coming on to talk to us a little bit about your career paths and about the financial industry today.
No problem.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. Okay, so we have a lot of questions to go over. I have a couple of questions myself, and a lot of our attendees also submitted a couple questions in advance. So I do want to jump right into it. But before we get into the questions, I'd like to hear a little bit more about who you are, where you guys came from, and about your career journey. So Jesse, if you want to get us kicked off.
Sure. So I work at RBC Global Asset Management in our North American Equities group. Basically, I work for the portfolio managers that manage a lot of our Canadian and U.S. equity funds, and I cover energy in Canada and U.S. My journey is a little, I guess, less traditional. My background is in mechanical engineering. I spent 4 years designing laboratories and medical facilities, and then decided to go back to school, pursue an MBA. Joined RBC 2 years ago through a rotational program, and eventually landed in the North American Equities group.
That's so cool. I actually don't come from a financial background either, and I ended up also working at RBC. So it's kind of funny how I come from, marketing or graphic design, and then I ended up in finance. It was kind of cool. Joel, what about you?
Yeah, so similar to, I guess, Marley and Jesse, I obviously work for a competitor of theirs, Russell Investments. So I'm a regional director with Russell Investments. What that means is a wholesaler. I manage my firm's relationships for Southwestern Ontario, so from Oakville down to Windsor. And I guess for those of you who aren't familiar with what a wholesaler does, is I represent an investment management firm, and we partner with different investment advisors and portfolio managers that are running money for high net worth clients. So I'm sort of the intermediary between one of the investment firms that they can use for their clients, and then we sell directly to investment advisors and portfolio managers. So I've been doing that for the last 3-4 years. I guess my journey, I've been in financial services for about 10 years. I started after my first year of university working for TD Bank as a bank teller. So started, working my way up through the bank channel. I worked as a financial advisor for a few years, and then moved into branch management, and then transitioned over into more of an investment and capital markets role. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I know there's, Marley mentioned, there's a few people that are looking to break into the financial services industry. So it's a great path to come up through the banks. If you have any questions about that, happy to chat about that as well.
I love that you you kind of done a bunch of different roles in the financial services industry. So I'm really excited to dive deeper into that a little bit more. Jesse, I know we touched a little bit on your journey and stuff like that, but what is your current role and what do you do on like a day-to-day?
So again, I work with the North American Equities group. So I work for 9 or 10 portfolio managers. Each one has a variety of mandates, whether they're managing mutual funds that focus on specific geographic areas, like just U.S. equities or Canadian equities, or something more specific like a dividend fund or a growth fund or a value fund. So I work with them, but I specifically cover the energy sector. So I cover Canadian, U.S. energy companies. So you're thinking the U.S. like Chevron, and in Canada, like the Canadian natural resources or the Suncors of the world. My day-to-day is not consistent. What I do on a daily basis seems to change all the time. And it's really dynamic, which I love. I think a lot of people picture my job as an analyst as somebody who's sitting there like doing DCF models all day. Really, it's much more holistic. I spend a lot of time talking with company management. A lot of time talking with sell-side analysts as well, and then talking with my portfolio managers, talk about ideas of how we can reflect certain trends we're seeing in the macro environment within their portfolios, whether that's with specific securities or baskets of securities that kind of reflect what we think is the outlook for a specific time frame.
That's awesome. We had a lot of questions come in from the attendees of if they think university degree is better than college for this industry. I personally have both. I started off at university. I ended up going into college, and I mean, I'm in marketing, so it's kind of different. Still in the financial services industry, kind of, but it's more marketing. But did you guys? Was it a university degree that you have, or college? And I know Jesse, you mentioned an MBA.
Yeah, so my university degree was in mechanical engineering actually, and then I decided to do an MBA because I knew that there were certain aspects of my career in engineering that I loved, a lot of like the client management and the portfolio management part, but didn't necessarily love the actual engineering technical side. So I decided to do an MBA to transition. So when I started the MBA, I had absolutely no interest in working in finance. Didn't really know what that looked like. I didn't know anybody who really worked in finance growing up. And it was something that I got exposed to over the course of doing the MBA and just kind of talking to people who are in the industry and understanding what their role was. So for me, the MBA, I mean, the education question of like whether college or university is better, I don't think it's necessarily that one is better. I think it's what are you going to do with the opportunity it provides you? And so the MBA provided me an opportunity that was very broad. And so I had the option of exploring, like, do I want to go into consulting? Do I want to work in finance? Do I want to work in a different industry altogether? And so it opened those doors and allowed me to have conversations with people that otherwise I probably never would have met or would have had the opportunity to talk to.
Okay, wait, so you kind of like, I stumbled into the industry. I've heard it before, people stumble into finance a lot. So yours came from networking a lot, like getting to know the industry from networking?
A lot of it. A lot of it was structured through the MBA, but it's the opportunity thing. Like the opportunity is there and you still have to take the initiative to make something with it. So I reached out to people across banks, VC firms, private equity firms, not necessarily to go and like ask for a job, but I genuinely was exploring and I wanted to understand what their job looked like and what that path looked like, whether or not that was something that was open for me. So I ended up deciding to join a rotational program at RBC because it still gave me that time to continue to explore. Like I was interested in finance, I was interested in doing something that was market-based or market relevant. But I didn't know what that function was. And having an engineering background, I thought, oh, maybe I want to work in tech or in strategy. And I have a strong client-facing background. So maybe I want to be an advisor. And it wasn't until I started talking to people that I realized how broad the wealth management or the asset management industry really is in terms of roles that you can take on and the skill sets that are desired from the industry are well beyond just finance. I look at my engineering background and sure, it like gives me an analytical or technical side, maybe. But a lot of what was really useful or transferable was the fact that I worked with clients and I can manage projects and the way of thinking, I think, or even the curiosity to learn and pursue what you're kind of intellectually curious about, I think was probably the most important skill that people were looking for and is probably served me best in my career.
Awesome. Joel, I have a question for you. So you've kind of done a lot in the financial service industry. You've worn multiple hats. What kind of skills do you think are required to excel in this industry? Did you have any that you already had? Have you learned any along the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. And just to sort of chime in on the question on college and university. So I did both as well. I think Marley and I actually went to the same college, Algonquin in Ottawa. But yeah, so I had done the 3 years there, and like a lot of people, I didn't really know what I wanted to do after high school. So I went in and did the 3-year business administration. I majored in finance, ended up really liking that, and then a lot of the credits were able to be transferred over, and then I finished up. I did 2 years at university. So I think they both lend themselves very well to what I'm doing right now. I think the college does a really good job of explaining the practicality and the relevance of some of the stuff. And then when you go to university, you learn all the theory behind it and, perhaps dive into stuff that might not be super relevant, but, having more of a working understanding of that is super useful. So I think that they both sort of complement each other very well. Skills that I think that are important for financial services, Jesse and I are on very different sides of things. Like he's working with more technical sort of things, and I'm working on more relationship management, more sales and capital markets. So I think for my industry, like just being like having very good people skills is probably the most important thing. Some of the biggest advisory teams that I work with, some of them are managing well over $1 billion. Some of them are very technical, but the ones that what I seem to notice is that they have very good people skills. They're very good at getting to know people, getting to know what makes them tick, reading people. And then they have people that on their teams that will do some of the more technical type of things. So I think having a mix between technical and people skills is very, very important, especially for what I do. I mean, it's a relationship management thing, but you also have to be able to talk about what makes a bond do what it's doing, or what makes an equity pool do what it's doing. So I think having a good balance between the people and the technical skills, and personally, I think technical skills, you can learn it, but if you don't have that sort of people personality, at least on my side of the industry, that's very important to have. So.
No, I get that. In terms of challenges, I know when you come from, a different industry altogether, for me, I did not come from finance, so I broke into it on my own. And my challenge was not knowing, the details of the investment industry. So I had to learn that as I went. So that was a challenge for me. Jesse, did you have any challenges when you started off at RBC? Did you have to learn a lot, or what did you do to tackle those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, within the context of the team I'm in now, imposter syndrome is a big one. Not necessarily like
that's a big thing for a lot of people, I think.
It's a powerful motivator too, and it's not necessarily from a technical perspective. Like, you'll learn if you try hard enough and you're curious about what you're doing and you genuinely enjoy it. Like, you'll put your effort into learning it, and again, that's the most important skill you can have, or the most important trait you can have in any job. But this industry, specifically my role, everything is focused on performance of the fund or performance of the mandate. And that's great if one quarter you hit it out of the park, but then you have to do that next quarter and the next quarter and the next quarter. And so there's not really much of a feedback loop when you are doing work. Like, I can sit there and work on an investment idea for weeks, and the outcome is, this is really not that great of an idea. And then there's no feedback, which is fine, but like that's the nature of the job. And that was really difficult to adjust to. You just wonder, like, am I doing a good job, or am I really terrible at my job? And do I just have bad ideas? And that's probably even harder in energy, where it's a very challenging sector, and good ideas seem harder and harder to come by. So I'm just getting comfortable with that ability to just look past whatever you're working on now. Like, let an idea either succeed or die and move on to the next thing, because your performance next quarter is just as important as your performance this quarter, and you don't get a lot of credit for what you've done in the past. It's only you get credit for what you continue to do consistently.
Right. That's great. Thank you. I do want to dive into volunteer opportunities. So we had a lot of questions on this. So specifically, what volunteer opportunities are available in the finance industry, and how can I find them? So volunteer opportunities are extremely important, no matter where you're at in your career journey. It really doesn't matter if you're at the beginning, where you're at, if you're older or younger. Depending on where you are in your career journey, I do want to mention to everyone on the line, there are different roles for you. So many financial institutions offer year-round co-ops, paid and unpaid. I want to say mostly paid in the finance industry. They range from 4 months to 8 months, and the postings for that will be just located on the company website. So if I think of just RBC, if you go to jobs.rbc.com, I believe, or if you just Google RBC jobs, you should be able to find winter co-ops, summer co-ops. So they do range from certain months to certain time frames. So you can look there. You could also check out local college or universities. Many of them are looking for volunteers to tutor students, manage university ventures, and there are even some universities who do like student-run investment funds and programs, which would be super interesting. So I do suggest people to look into those. I don't know if you guys, Joel or Jesse, have done volunteering in finance. Those are just the ones that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there's hundreds more that you can do, but just off the top of my head, those are the ones I could think of. So next question, let me think here. Okay, so here's a good one. How should you go about gaining experience in the finance industry when you don't have any experience or contacts? So I'm gonna take a stab at this one. You guys feel free to jump in. So we've kind of briefly touched on this a little bit today, but the best way for you to gain experience is to literally put yourself out there. By volunteering, networking, taking courses, educating yourself. The more you put yourself out there, the more opportunities you'll find. So just as an example, if you log into fullyprepped.ca, you'll find the Define Your Career Path module in the Learning Library. And I personally love this module because it helps you create a career vision. It helps you create a short-term plan where you can pinpoint what you need to do to land future employment in your area of choice. And there's even another module where you can look at your current skills and how they're transferable in other industries. So you might have a skill right now that you don't know could apply to the financial industry. So it's a great module for you to check out, and I do strongly suggest it. So other than networking and all that, do you guys have any suggestions on how you can gain experience? Maybe we can talk a little bit about certain designations that may or may not be required. So I will let, maybe Joel, if you want to talk to that, because I know you do have a designation. So maybe if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's tough to break in, like just the way you were saying, like, just don't get discouraged. Like, I think that is very important, just to like, continue knowing what you're doing and always trying to refine your skills. I know for me, when I started off in the financial services industry, I literally, with my grandpa, he introduced me to his bank, his RBC branch manager, and she's like, I don't have anything for you, but here's someone you could talk to. So it's really like learning how to leverage your network. And I remember probably going to 20 different bank branches in Ottawa and dropping off my resume, and no one called me, but eventually someone did. And you get in eventually, right? So just be persistent and try to get introduced to as many people as you can. And I think to Marley's point about like webinars and stuff like that, we're in a bit of a weird, unique environment right now with COVID, where everyone's sort of working from home. And I know there's a plethora of different webinars and podcasts and stuff like that out there right now for people to take advantage of, to learn perhaps some of the technical stuff, what's going on with the markets, what's going on with flows in the investment industry. So take advantage of that right now. And as it pertains to designations, yeah, so I mean, a good one to start off with, whether you want to be dealing with clients directly, or just get like a good overview of the financial or the investment world. I have my CSC. I mean, I think that's sort of table stakes for anyone trying to get into the financial services industry. So with everyone, again, working at home right now, perhaps some time to get through stuff like that. That's a great one to start with. The IFIC is another good one to start with. It's not as involved as the CSC, but that's a good one. On the advisory side, they're probably the most sort of common ones that I see, or with the big advisors, is like the CFP or PFP. In order to be discretionary, which means basically being able to run big amounts of money without having to call clients to make trades, you either need to have your CFA or your CIM. So Jesse, I know he has a bit more technical background than me, so he could speak to the CFA. That's probably the pinnacle of designations in the financial services industry. But the CIM is great too. So I mean, that's Chartered Investment Manager. That's the designation that I have. Really just sort of gives you an overview of valuing securities. And in it lends itself to, just like from a bit of a credibility standpoint. I mean, I'm 28 years old. I'm dealing with advisors that are in their 50s or 60s that have been running hundreds of millions of dollars for longer than I've been alive. So it lends itself. Anytime you can have a designation like that, it gives you a bit more credibility. And if anyone has any questions about the CIM or the CSC or any of those, happy to answer those offline.
I think it's important to note that there's a lot of Canadian regulatory bodies that offer courses or designations specific to the Canadian investment industry. So for anybody who has like extensive global market investment experience, but not so much Canadian, you're already 3 steps ahead. All you need to do is take a Canadian-based course. Really, it's a great example of a transferable skill that I was talking about. So like most Canadian securities course or investments funds courses in Canada will typically tie in anything specific to the Canadian market. I did put a URL in our chat. So if you check out ifsc.ca, they have a lot of great courses you can take that vary in price if you're on a budget. And the courses vary from, an ETF course to the IFIC course. So I would really recommend those, and they're really great for anyone looking to switch careers into finance too. So I know we had a couple questions on that one. So okay, so let's keep going because I know we're getting halfway through here. Let's see. Okay, so Jesse, maybe you can touch on this one a little bit. So this question is from somebody who is hopefully on the webinar today. I manage a portion of my own portfolio and have vested interest in its performance. In your experience, do PFPs carry that same passion managing other people's finance? I think for our experience with working at RBC and RBC Global Asset Management, I'm going to say yes, they carry the same passion, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very different, obviously. Like your risk tolerance is is quite, and my risk tolerance in my own personal account is very different than the money we manage for other people. But the way we think about, or the best way I can possibly describe how we think about managing our funds is, let's take the Canadian dividend fund. Some of our money might be in there, but realistically, the average unit holder of that fund holds it for 9 to 11 years. We could make really big bets and try to hit it out of the park every year and be a top decile portfolio manager, have top decile performance every year, but it's really not sustainable. It's a very difficult thing to do. You take those big swings, which means you're introducing more risk. Our unit holder, like we're thinking about Bob and Red Deer, who's put his retirement money into these funds, not trying to get a 30% return every year. We're stewards of capital. We need to be able to safeguard people's assets and their livelihood. So the way we think about portfolio management is long-term. And if you're a top quartile or top 2 quartile portfolio manager over a 10-year period, you're a top decile portfolio manager over that average time frame. So it's really a game of sustainability, and we'd rather have sustainable returns rather than big returns. So managing your own account, obviously, that you do take an interest in that, and that's great. But your risk tolerance is obviously very different, as is mine in my own account. So I make very different bets in my own account as I would with other people's money. It's just a different attitude towards goals and risk management.
I remember hearing Sarah Riopel, who's a portfolio manager at RBC. She was saying, I manage, billions of dollars for, my family members even. So it's a lot of pressure. So yes, I take it seriously. And it's like I'm managing my own money because I'm managing the people, that I don't know, people who I know. So it's a lot of responsibility. So yeah, for sure they take it seriously. So I'd like to dive into the questions that we received throughout the webinar. I think we've got a little bit more time to answer those. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to dive on in, and if you guys feel like you want to answer one, just feel free. If I can answer any of them, I will try my best to do so. I think I'm just going to be managing all of the questions coming through as they come. So I'm just going to start from the top. So are new immigrants in Canada able to break into the Canadian banking industry without taking any certifications? I think it's definitely possible if you network and you have a great resume and you have some experience, but what are your thoughts on that?
I could speak. I mean, just to retail banking, that seems to be a pretty entry-level role that a lot of people sort of get their feet wet in the financial services industry. Yeah, you can definitely get in without having any certifications or courses, but once you start looking to get into a role where you're giving advice to clients, then they generally want you to at least do your IFIC to get licensed to be able to sell mutual funds through the MFDA. So, to get a job like a sort of junior sales or something like that, it's certainly not necessary. But once you start looking to get into any sort of providing advice or you need to be licensed to give advice, then yeah, the IFIC or the CSC is something that I do know that the banks all require. So
I wouldn't say anything in my industry is necessarily required. The CFA seems to be table stakes if you want to advance. Like I'm working on level 3 right now, but it doesn't prevent me from doing my job. And to be honest, it might make me marginally better at doing my job, but it doesn't like preclude my ability to do my job. But it is something you kind of have to have your belt the further you go. But that being said, it's like it doesn't mean you have to have it before you start applying for roles in finance. Although having it on your resume that you are pursuing a designation obviously shows that you also have a commitment to the industry and general interest in what you're doing, and that's always a positive.
I actually love that you mentioned that because in a lot of job postings, you'll notice that people will say pursuing the CFA or pursuing the CSC. So as long as you are interested and you are pursuing it, you can put that on your resume and it will give you kind of a leg up in comparison to other candidates. So I do want to put that out there. This one, I think, Joel, you'd be able to answer this one. As a client advisor, how do you handle the current market ups and downs with your clients' goals in mind?
Yeah, so I don't run any money myself for individual end investors. I'm dealing with more intermediaries. So think of people like RBC, DS, Scotia McLeod. So I'm dealing with advisors. But I think that, the sort of common theme is, just you have to keep a very long-term time horizon in mind, right? I mean, back in March, who knew where we'd be right now? And it looks like the markets have almost done a perfect V. So where do we go from here? There's certainly could be more volatility on the horizon with the election coming up. Obviously COVID continues to be a big concern. So I think having a very diversified portfolio is important, and then understanding and making sure that your clients KYC and the risk and their asset allocation is all sort of up to date, and doing sort of that rediscovery with clients. Has anything changed? Because investing is a long-term game, and I shouldn't say game, but it's a long-term endeavor. And really, like, if you're looking to do anything within the next kind of year or two, other than cash or very short-term safe bonds, then it is pretty speculative. So, long-winded answer, but I think being diversified and just keeping in mind the long term, that's the safest way to keep clients invested and happy.
I like that. I'm a big person that I believe RBC put out an article, or RBC Global Asset Management, and it was emotional investing, and it was on how to deal with the volatility in the markets, but also not make rash investment decisions that could impact your portfolio on a large level. So I think that's a good one. So if anyone's interested, let me know and I can send it to you. Okay. So this one, I think it can apply to all three of us. I recently graduated from GBC in financial planning, postgraduate certificate, and I'm working towards my CSC. That's awesome. Is it enough, or should I have CFA to have a career in finance? I think we kind of touched on this a little bit. I think it really depends what kind of role you're looking to get into, but maybe one of you guys can touch a little bit more on it.
I can start, and then if Jesse wants to add. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people that do exactly what I do, they have their CFA. I don't have my CFA, and I don't plan to get it at this point. So it really depends on the role that you're doing. I have a lot of friends that have done their CFA. I have a lot of colleagues that have done it. It's a huge endeavor. So you have to really know what you want, and if having your CFA is required to do that role, then yeah, absolutely. But I remember when I graduated, a lot of people were, the next sort of step after graduating was, I'm going to do my CFA, and it's a big endeavor, and if you need it to do what you want to do, then absolutely. But like Marlon said, it's not necessarily always required depending on the role you want to do.
Yeah, I think CFA is relatively specific, which is interesting that it's such a widely held designation and such a widely pursued designation, especially since it's at least a 3-year process of getting it, plus your work experience. It's an extremely hard designation to get. So I think when you are pursuing designations, be very, very certain that this is what you want and this is the path you want to start down, because it's also a very expensive designation to get, especially if only 40-something% pass each of the 3 levels. It can take a lot longer than you anticipated, and it's 200 hours studying per level. I would just really, really think about, maybe even talk to people in the industry. Like, LinkedIn is a great tool. You can always reach out to people. I found people are generally very receptive to offering help or advice. I mean, it's now over the phone as opposed to over coffee, which is a little less personal, but
it also is less pressure, though, isn't it? I find it's less pressure.
A little bit. I find it hard to not have visual facial cues sometimes, but otherwise it's it is a little bit less pressure than an in-person meeting. But I think talking to people in the industry and understanding how they got there and what their role is and where you really see yourself doesn't mean you set your life 5-10 years down the road and that's what you're going to do and that's it. Again, I never thought I would work in equities, but I ended up here just kind of following things that interested me. And so having those conversations and understanding what it takes to get there and what you need, I think those are really important.
That's great. Thank you. A little tip for everybody on the line. My strategy when I'm looking for a new job or when I started out, was I look at job postings and I look at what's required. So if it says you need a CFA, it might be something you're interested in pursuing. That might be a good idea, but it gives you an indication of what you would need in order to have the job you're looking for. And then you'll be able to look at your current skills and see what you're missing. And if you're missing any current skills, then you'll be able to take courses or, anything online. There's a lot of actually free courses online you can take, not necessarily finance related, but that where you can learn more and adapt your skills. So you just got time for a couple more, maybe one more question. Okay. There's so many amazing questions. Okay, so we have a lot of questions, I think, from newcomers as well. And I really want to touch on this because it's really important, especially if you're doing a career pivot or if you're just coming to Canada. Check out our RBC Venture Arrive. If you haven't yet, I strongly suggest you do. They have amazing resources to help you come to Canada, find employment. Their blogs are amazing. We work a lot with them on their blog content. So I strongly suggest you check them out. If you need the link, let me know. I'll send it over to you, no problem. But here's the last question. I have an educational background in finance, but I don't have a working background. I have a CSC certificate. I'm trying to get into the financial industry, but I couldn't get any information. Do you have any advice to newcomers? So other than, I mean, the fact that you have the educational background and your CSC certificate, I think that's incredible. So good for you for pursuing that. I think networking would be really great for you to do. And like I said, check out Arrive for their resources. They have so many amazing webinars like Prepped. So I do suggest you check those out. But Joel, Jesse, I don't know if you have any lasting words for advice for newcomers and how they can tap into the financial services industry.
I mean, I would probably echo the networking aspect. I know it can be really hard, and I've done it as well. And you kind of have to get used to non-answers or rejection, but that's part of it. It at some point comes a little bit of a numbers game sometimes too. But generally, I found that people are very receptive to offering help. Again, it was easier when you go for a coffee, but people are still receptive to phone calls or Zoom calls. Part of that, I think, keep in mind that you have to be flexible because people are working around their own working schedules. But also make sure that when you are reaching out to people, you genuinely are exploring. I think people want to talk about their jobs. People want to talk about the jobs because they're passionate about it, and they want to help people who are out there to learn. And we remember trying to get our foot in the industry as well, and it's a really, really difficult thing to do. And I think there is a really strong propensity to want to give back and want to help people, or at least direct them if you can't help them directly, or set them in the right path. So I think that networking aspect is just really important for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. So we're just a little bit over time, but I want to thank you both for jumping on today. And for everyone on the line, I think it sums up, like, overall, breaking into the financial services industry requires, the education, some certifications, and the interest to evolve as your career progresses, which is common in all industries, right? So if you participated in the personal brand webinar that I hosted a few weeks ago, you'll likely remember me talking about how important it is to update and keep your personal brand up to date. So the most important thing to remember is that you're in control of your career path, and you have the power to take it where you want it to go. So don't be afraid to reach out to people in the financial services industry or any other industry for help, for questions, or just to learn more about a role you're interested in. So I strongly suggest you check out our exercises at fullyprepped.ca to put your best foot forward during the job search. We have like resume templates, email templates you can use while networking. So if you want to ask somebody out for, a quick little coffee chat to learn more about how to be a financial planner, we have some resources for you for that. So, feel free to reach out to me as well if you have any questions, and I'll do my best. I am seeing all of your notes for the article, so I will send it all out. And I also saw a note of somebody asking about project management. Next week, we're actually going to have a webinar with 2 project managers, one in the financial services industry and one in the technology industry, which is going to be great. So keep an eye out on our social channels for that. And I will also be sending out an email in the next couple of days regarding how you can sign up for that. So thank you, everybody, for attending. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.